Everything at my sister's wedding looked like a dream. Sunlight spilling over the vineyard, laughter echoing through the garden, champagne glasses clinking in the breeze. But on day 3, as we sat smiling through the post-wedding brunch, my husband leaned in and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "We need to leave now." I froze. My fork stopped midair. "What the hell are you talking about?" I hissed under my breath. Ryan's eyes never left the groom. "You really didn't notice the groom? He's not who he says he is." What he said next made my stomach twist into a knot so tight. I couldn't breathe. My sister had just married a man who didn't exist. Before I tell you what we discovered, ask yourself this. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt something was off, even when everyone around you was clapping? You were probably right. 3 days earlier, everything had felt magical. Ryan and I had just pulled into the coastal resort in Santa Barbara, where Haley and Evan's wedding weekend was taking place. The property was stunning white stucco villas, sweeping ocean views, and palm trees dancing in the breeze. My sister had always dreamed of a wedding like this, and somehow Evan had delivered. Haley met us at the main entrance, glowing in a flowing blue sundress. Her blonde hair was curled to perfection, and her eyes were lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Ryan," she squealed, pulling me into a hug so tight I nearly dropped my overnight bag. "I'm so glad you're here." She turned to Ryan and gave him a warm smile. "And thank you for finally taking time off." I told Emily, "This wouldn't be complete without you. It's good to finally meet Evan properly," Ryan said. "He must be a hell of a guy to make her this happy." "Oh, he's perfect," Haley said, practically floating. "You'll see." And we did, at least on the surface. Evan Blake was every inch the ideal man. Tall, clean-cut, charming. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a gentle kiss on the cheek. "So this is the famous big sister," he grinned. "You two really do look alike." I laughed, flattered, as Haley beamed. Our parents, Janet and Paul Carter, were already seated on the villa terrace, sipping wine and gushing over Evan. Dad shook his hand like he'd known him for years. Mom kept commenting on how respectful and put together he seemed. The welcome dinner that night was like something out of a movie. Candles flickered under hanging lights, a jazz quartet played in the background, and everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Evan made a toast that had even my cynical uncle tearing up. Haley looked at him like he'd hung the moon. Ryan leaned over during the applause and said quietly, "He's got presence, like he rehearsed that." I smiled, not taking him seriously. Maybe he did. It's a wedding, not a TED Talk. "Still," Ryan muttered, eyes following Evan across the room. "Something about him feels too curated." I brushed it off. Ryan was always a bit suspicious of people who seemed too polished. As a cybersecurity analyst, he was trained to spot patterns and anomalies, and sometimes he overanalyzed. But in that moment, surrounded by fairy lights and laughter, I didn't feel a single warning bell. I wish I had. The next morning started with a yoga session on the lawn. Haley had arranged a private instructor, and while everyone was stretching into sun salutations, Evan brought out fresh smoothies for the bridesmaids. "Isn't he the sweetest?" Haley whispered to me, cheeks flush with joy. I nodded. Objectively, yes. Evan was attentive, thoughtful, always 2 steps ahead. But there was something calculated about it, like he was ticking boxes off a checklist, rather than acting from genuine care. Later that afternoon, Ryan and I went for a walk along the bluff trail behind the resort. The ocean stretched out like glass beneath us, but Ryan wasn't admiring the view. He was thinking he's too smooth, Ryan said finally. "Still on this," I teased. "I'm not being paranoid, Em," he replied. "He has 2 phones. I saw him switch them behind his back this morning. One with a black case, one with a red one. Maybe once for work," I said, trying to sound logical. "He does run some kind of startup, doesn't he?" "That's the thing," Ryan said. "No one here, including your dad, seems to know exactly what that startup does." And I checked. There's no company registered under his name in California. I stopped walking. You looked him up. Ryan nodded, unapologetic. I just did a basic name and state search. Nothing came up, not even a LinkedIn. That gave me pause. In today's world, everyone had a digital footprint, especially someone as high profile as Evan supposedly was. Could be under a parent company I offered weekly. Maybe Ryan admitted. But you've got to admit it's strange. That night at the rehearsal dinner, I started watching more carefully. Evan was charming as always. He made a point to toast my parents, complimenting my mother's cooking and my father's career in finance. He asked Haley's childhood best friend about her job at the hospital and remembered the name of her dog. But when no one was watching, I caught little Flicker, she's jaw tightening when someone interrupted him, his eyes narrowing when the photographer asked him to pose differently. Twice during dinner, he stepped away to take phone calls. Once, when I walked past the hallway to the back patio, I caught him speaking sharply into his phone. "No, it has to be done before Sunday," he hissed. "I don't care what it takes. Do not screw this up." When he saw me, his face changed in an instant smile on VoiceLight. "Just a quick business call," he said, tapping his phone. "Don't worry, nothing's going to ruin this weekend." But something already had. I just didn't know it yet. The morning of the wedding day, the estate buzzed with energy. Hair dryers whirred. Steam rose from pressed gowns and makeup brushes moved like tiny wands of magic. Haley was in her element, laughing with her bridesmaids, drinking mimosas, floating through the suite in a silk robe embroidered with bride. She looked radiant. If anything was bothering her, it didn't show. Evan stopped by to drop off a handwritten note for Haley before the ceremony. It was folded carefully, sealed with wax, and tied with a navy ribbon. "She deserves a little extra today," he said, smiling as he handed it to me. "Tell her I'll see her at the altar." He looked sincere, calm, perfect. But after he left, Ryan pulled me aside in the hallway. "I don't want to ruin anything, but I just ran a facial recognition scan." I blinked. I used one of the wedding photos your mom posted last night," he said. "Ran it through a secure database." Evan's face came up 3 hits, 3 aliases, 3 different states. I stared at him, my stomach turning. He used to go by Tyler Evans in Nevada, then Jared Lawson in Texas. Both identities are linked to women who filed fraud complaints. Nothing stuck. He's slippery, but it's not nothing. My heart pounded. "Are you absolutely sure?" Ryan hesitated. "Facial recognition isn't perfect, but the match confidence was over 90%. That's not random." I didn't want to believe it, but something inside Meth, same thing that had felt off since we arrived, tightened into a knot. Later that afternoon, I was helping Haley adjust her veil when Stephanie, her college roommate and bridesmaid, mentioned something odd. "I can't believe Haley ended up with Evan," she said, laughing. I still remember when she was obsessed with that guy from Aspen she dated for 2 years. "Evan is the guy from Aspen," I said, confused. Stephanie blinked. "No, that guy's name was Logan." Haley showed me his picture. Different guy entirely. I froze. Different name, different face. When I tried to bring it up gently to Haley, she just laughed it off. Steph's always mixing up names. Evan and I met in Aspen, but it was through mutual friends. She probably got details crossed. She was glowing happy hours away from walking down the aisle. I didn't press it. But later, while walking past the groomsman's suite, I heard Evan again, his tone clipped and sharp. I said, "No contact until Monday. If she finds out now, we're screwed." He paused. "Yes, the accounts are ready. I just need one more meeting with her father, then we're out." He didn't notice me, but I noticed everything. His voice wasn't just cold. It was strategic. And for the first time, I knew he wasn't just playing a role. He was executing a plan. After what I overheard, I didn't sleep much. The next morning, while Haley was off taking portraits with the bridal party, I cornered Ryan on the terrace. "You were right," I whispered. "I heard Evan last night." He was talking about accounts about her father. Like this is some kind of setup. Ryan's face darkened. That confirms it. And guess what else I dug deeper? The startup Evan says he runs. Still nothing. But the alias Jared Lawson had an LLC registration in Texas, dissolved a year ago after a woman filed a restraining order. I rubbed my temples. Why is he doing this to Haley? He's not Ryan, said grimly. He's using her just like he used the others. She's the access point, to what I didn't have to wonder long. That afternoon, my dad mentioned casually over champagne that he and Evan were planning to chat about some real estate ventures. He's got an uncle in Palm Springs who flips boutique hotels, Dad said, clearly impressed. Wants to loop me in. My father ran a real estate investment firm that managed millions. For a predator, it was the jackpot. I tried to stay calm. Has he seen any of your business plans? Dad chuckled. Just the pitch decks. Nothing sensitive. Why I shook my head. Just curious. Ryan's words echoed in my head. She's the access point. Later that day, during the cocktail hour before the reception, I overheard Evan talking to one of my uncles about Aspen. You know, that's where I met Haley, he said casually, sipping from a whiskey glass. She spilled coffee on me at a ski lodge cafe. Total meet cute. My blood ran cold. 2 nights ago, he'd told the story at dinner that they met at a fundraising gala. Said Haley had been dragged there by a friend and he'd been presenting for a nonprofit. Which one was it? When I asked Haley again, she repeated the ski lodge version. He always teases me for being clumsy. She giggled. It was such a mess. I had whipped cream on my coat for days. 2 stories, 1 lie. I pulled Ryan aside. He's not just inconsistent. He's good at it, I said. He's giving different people different backstories and hoping we don't compare notes. Ryan nodded. It's a common manipulation technique. Create just enough warmth, charm, and false familiarity that no one wants to question you. But I was done being polite. I needed to protect my sister, even if it meant breaking her heart. It wasn't until late that night, after the reception had ended, and the last sparkler had fizzled out, that Ryan showed me what he had been working on behind the scenes. We were back in our suite, still dressed in formal wear, the distant sound of music drifting up from the garden. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, expression grave. I didn't want to ruin the day, he said softly. But it's gone far enough. You need to see this. He opened a secure folder on his phone, photos, legal documents, screenshots. First, a driver's license. Jared Lawson, Texas. Then another, Tyler Evans, Nevada. Same face, different names. Next came screenshots of financial complaints. 2 Reddit threads. A local news article. The headlines made my heart sink. Man accused of romance investment scam vanishes after pocketing $150K. He promised me forever. 3 women speak out on same man using multiple names. I scrolled further. One of the women had even posted screenshots of text, same writing style, same emojis, same phrases Evan used with Haley. I ran reverse searches on his engagement photos. Ryan said, found a match with a Facebook account under a third name, Michael Dean from Arizona. That account was deleted last week. I stared at the phone, numb. Why isn't he in jail? No one pressed full charges. He plays the gray zone. No direct threats, just charm, manipulation, and access. He gets what he wants. Money, status, connections, and disappears before people realize the damage. I wanted to scream, not just because my sister had married a stranger, but because she had fallen so hard, so fast, so blindly. How long do you think he's been planning this? I whispered. At least a year, Ryan said. He probably scoped highly through her work, or socials, saw her connections, researched your dad, then swooped in like a storybook prince. My hands shook as I held the phone. There were wedding photos, smiles, laughter. A man who didn't exist, staring back at me with eyes that suddenly looked empty. We have to stop him, I said, standing up. We will, Ryan replied. But we have to be careful. He's good at slipping away when cornered. If we confront him too soon, he'll vanish again. So what do we do? Ryan looked at me steady. We get Haley somewhere private. We show her this, and we make sure she's safe before we say anything to him. It was nearly midnight. The wedding was over. The fallout hadn't even begun. The morning after the wedding, the atmosphere was light and sleepy. Guests drifted into the estate garden for the farewell brunch. Sunglasses on, coffee in hand, still basking in the afterglow of what they thought was a flawless celebration. Haley was seated at the head table, radiant in a soft ivory sundress, her hair tied back in a ponytail, laughing as she sipped mimosas with our parents. Evan was next to her, charming as ever, tossing inside jokes at the groomsmen and greeting guests like he'd known them for years. It made my skin crawl. Ryan was tense beside me, checking his phone repeatedly. He'd looped in one of his cybersecurity contacts, who had just confirmed it. The aliases all connected. 3 women had filed financial fraud claims. One even named Haley's new husband direct under a name he'd used in Colorado. It was time. I stood up and whispered to Ryan, "Let's get her now." We waited until Haley got up to use the restroom and followed her quietly down the hall. I gently called out, "Hey, can I talk to you for a sec?" She smiled, still glowing. "Sure. Is everything okay?" I hesitated. "Can we go somewhere private?" She looked concerned but nodded. We stepped into one of the side suites. Ryan closed the door behind us. "Okay," Haley said slowly. "What's going on?" I didn't waste time. I pulled out Ryan's phone, opened the folder of evidence, and placed it in her hand. What is this?" "Haley," I said gently. "Evan isn't who he says he is. His real name is unknown, but he's used at least 3 aliases in the last 5 years. He has a pattern meeting women marrying fast, accessing their family's finances, and disappearing." She blinked, her mouth slightly open. "No," she whispered. "No, this is some kind of mistake." Ryan stepped forward. "We've verified it all, Haley. Names, documents, court records. He's under investigation in 3 states. She scrolled her hands, starting to tremble. This isn't Evan. This isn't my Evan." I overheard him. I said softly, "Multiple times talking about your dad. About accounts, about making a move before Monday." Her face crumpled. "He told me he loved me," she whispered. "He said he wanted to build a life with me. He said the same to others." Ryan said gently, almost word for word. For a long moment, Haley just stood there. Her entire body seemed to deflate like the air had been sucked out of her chest. And then she straightened. "I want to confront him," she said. "I want to hear it from him." "Haley, that's not safe," I said. "I don't care. I need to see his face when he realizes I know." We agreed on a plan. Haley would invite Evan into the garden-side pergola for a private moment. Ryan would discreetly text a contact at the local sheriff's office who was already on standby thanks to the flagged identity report. 15 minutes later, Haley sat across from Evan under a flowering arch, hands in her lap, calm, but cold. "I just want to ask one thing," she said. "Who are you really?" Evan blinked. "What?" She slid the phone across the table. "Your face. 3 names, 3 women, 1 pattern." His expression didn't break for a second. "Haley." I can explain, but then he saw Ryan and me emerging from the path. He stood suddenly, knocking over his chair. "You don't understand," he snapped. "It's more complicated than that." "Not anymore," Ryan said, raising his phone. "We've already sent everything to law enforcement." Footsteps. A deputy emerged from the hedge-line, hand resting on his belt. "Evan Black. That's your name. I need you to come with me." For the first time, Evan's mask cracked. He looked at Haley, eyes pleading. We were happy. I could have made it real. She didn't even flinch. You never gave me that choice. As they cuffed him and led him away, I watched my sister crumble and rebuild all in one breath. She didn't cry, not yet, but her eyes were no longer soft. They were awake. The rest of the day blurred into fragment siren statements, stunned guests whispering in corners, and our mother sobbing into a linen napkin as the deputies took Evan away in handcuffs. My father was livid not just at Evan but at himself. How could I have let this happen? He muttered over and over, pacing across the patio. He complimented your quarterly reports and memorized Mom's bruschetta recipe, I said gently. You weren't careless. He was calculated. Haley sat in silence for hours. She refused food, barely blinked. It wasn't until late evening, after most of the guests had left, and the estate was eerily quiet, that she finally spoke. Do you think he ever loved me? She asked. Her voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her shoulders. I think he loved control, not you. She nodded slowly. Then I'm glad he lost it. That night she moved into my guest room. The suite she had shared with Evan remained untouched. We left it that way. 6 months later, Haley still hasn't said the word wedding, but she's been going to therapy twice a week. Some days are harder than others, especially when old photos pop up in her phone memories, or when someone casually asks how married life is going. She usually just smiles and changes the subject. She's living with me and Ryan for now. Our guest room has turned into her sanctuary plants on the windowsill, a new journal beside her bed, and no reminders of Evan anywhere in sight. Our parents are slowly regaining balance too. Dad hired a private investigator to audit every account, and Mom's been attending a support group for family members of scam victims. As for me, I've learned something simple but profound. Real love doesn't confuse, it clarifies. It doesn't isolate, it protects. Haley says the hardest part wasn't that Evan Lee Edit, was that she believed him over herself. But next time, she told me just last week, if something feels wrong, I'll trust the silence more than the words. I don't know when she'll love again. But I do know this. She won't be fooled again. Not because she's jaded, but because now she's awake. And this time her heart isn't just open. It's guarded by truth.